Greetings to one and all, it's your old buddy Jay here, coming at you with some more countermeasures goodness. Another intermission today. I want to talk about this film, and this film is called Tenet, and it's all about time. Now, Tenet finally released in cinemas this week, and luckily I had the privilege of watching a preview copy prior to this, so that was always good. Now, this film is directed by Christopher Nolan, and it stars John David Washington, Robert Arbat Pattinson, and Elizabeth Debicki, among others. And I actually did enjoy this film. Now, there may be some mild spoilers ahead because there's no way to talk about the film without actually having a few, the plot and the premise is so intrinsic to the whole the conversation around the film that there's bound to be mild spoilers. So apologies in advance. Hopefully it won't spoil it too much. I'll try and avoid anything significant. Now, I've seen this film described as a spy film on acid, which is pretty much what it is. It's James Bond. It's Nolan's Bond, really. Nolan loves messing around with time. So some of his previous films like Memento, Inception, Interstellar, they all had parts of those films that focused heavily on time, whether it was running backwards or at different moments overlapping. And like within Inception, it was all about extending time through the depth of dreams, etc. So it's all high concept stuff, which and it's no shock that this is a high concept film. So the basic plot is that a spy must manipulate time to prevent World War III. And that's basically it in a nutshell. Now, John Washington plays a CIA agent. You never learn his name. He is just called the protagonist. Halfway through the film, I thought, what's this guy called? I can't even remember what his name is. And it turns out you never really hear his name. So, in fact, I don't think you ever do hear his name. I'm sure there's an Easter egg in here somewhere alluding to what it is, but I haven't seen it. Now, it is... a nice idea. I really like the idea. So someone from the future essentially is trying to destroy the past. So presumably because we've trashed the planet with all our plastic bags, and they're probably on like season 500 of Love Island. So they've decided that they're just going to go back and remove that part of history where we did all the bad stuff. They discuss it during the film, and it brings up this theory called the grandfather paradox. Now, the grandfather paradox is, if I go back in time to kill my grandfather, how can I be born to perform that action? So they do question this and discuss this a little bit in the film, and ultimately they just hand wave it and say, no, it's fine. If you do that, it has no consequences to the future. It's just the way things are. So when you get past that premise, actually everything starts to make sense. So in the future, there's a technology that's been created that can invert objects and people. And so by that I mean, some things are travelling forward in future, and some are travelling to the past. So people from the future can send stuff back in time. That's basically how that works. Like in this scene, one bullet's travelling forward, one bullet's travelling in the past. And so she catches it because as it's in the past, she would have dropped it, etc. Anyway, probably need to have a bit of a longer chat about that, but that's essentially the premise of the movie. It does allow for some really interesting fight scenes where some people are moving forward and some are moving backwards. It has vehicles that are moving forward, moving backwards. It's just really interesting to see, what happens when a forward time loop and a reverse time loop kind of clash and interact. So that is really, really cool. I am looking forward to some physicists pulling this apart in the future. I'm sure Nolan doesn't really care about the facts, and like I said, kind of hand waves a certain amount of kind of scientific knowledge and physics. I'm sure people are bending over backwards to get their opinions on that out there. I am looking forward to seeing that whole debate. Old Arbats, my buddy Pattinson, my boy, is pretty amazing in this role. He's instantly likeable, as I'm sure he is in real life. And Debicki also does a great job. She is the emotional core of the movie, and she really holds all that together really well. I would say the worst part of the movie is Kenneth Branagh. He hams this up like he's in some cheesy Bond ripoff, and I really sort of struggled with him as the bad guy. I kind of feel like they should have cast just an unknown. That if they'd had that they should have. They should have found someone like Mads Mikkelsen, a similar sort of character to that. It would have felt a little bit more convincing. I didn't really like his performance very much. Considering, he still gives a good performance, but considering how amazing everybody else is in the film, he really starts to show his age, and he's not. It just doesn't feel as fluid and adaptable as some of the other actors. Now, the design of all of Nolan's films is always sublime. The lighting, the camera work, the costumes, the outfits, the scenarios. You're going from kind of like desert to inside crates to running up buildings to all these kind of environments that he places his characters in are really interesting. There's a bit like Inception. There's a lot of wandering down the street explaining what's going on, because with a film like this, you need to do that. You need to establish the rules before you then have the next set. It sets everything up for the next scene, and there are a lot of scenes that are basically like heists, which he does love heists. So like Inception, The Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises. They all had like moments of people performing these complex heists, and I think this film absolutely lends itself to here's a little explanation, and there's a fun kind of heist that follows the rules of that explanation. So I do think that's something that's really interesting, and I did really enjoy that part of it. So after a lot of the old forward and backwards shenanigans, the entire film culminates in an epic battle. So I'm not spoiling anything, because you do see those guys in the trailer I'm showing here, where they're just all sort of running across this big open plain, and that is really, really good in that there's things happening on both time statuses that are happening simultaneously. So there's a building that reforms itself and also gets blown apart. There's this thing that they introduced called the temporal pincer, which sounds so crap, but actually it's really good. And it introduces this idea that you can attack a building in forward time and reverse time. The idea being that the people going forward informs the people going backwards, so that they can make the mission run smoothly and actually get the outcome that they want. It's really, really interesting, and it's great. It's all highbrow stuff and will be discussed for years to come, like all of his films are, I'm sure. It's just really, really complex, and I like the fact that they kind of get to points in the film where they're like, well, if you haven't worked this out by now, we're leaving you behind. And I like films that do that and don't dumb it down too much for everyone constantly. So I did like that part. Once you've immersed yourself in this world, after about an hour, you do start to make sense of things. You start to think about how these two things are running alongside each other. It starts to kind of all plan out, in your mind. So it does make sense if you pay attention. It's not one to be flicking on your phone while you're watching. You're just going to lose yourself. If you look away for 2 minutes and look back, you may as well restart the film, because you're not going to know what's going on. Is it Nolan's best film? I'm seeing a lot of people say that it is. I don't think it is. I think it certainly is the most complex. Even Interstellar, that I thought was pretty complex, made more sense of the space-time bookcase, being a sort of simple premise, whereas this, you really have to sort of overthink what's going on at all times. There's things moving forwards and backwards, and people talking and telling you the opposite. It is a lot going on, a lot to take in, so you do have to pay attention. Artistically, obviously, it's visually stunning. The art direction is amazing. I spotted a couple of dodgy CGI moments, but that might have just been the copy that I was viewing. And after 2 hours of the visual and audio assault, maybe it was just a few flying rocks that looked a bit PlayStation 2, So we'll have to wait and see on a reviewing of that. I'll try and catch it at the cinema, or watch the Blu-ray, and then I'll be able to reassess that. But I thought I spotted a couple of early mistakes there, but that might just be my eyes. The music score is obviously brilliant. There is reverse music in this, which adds to the style and the overall theme of the film. The theme music and the talking in this film felt really unbalanced to me. There are moments where people are discussing stuff you cannot hear really what they're going on because it's so in tune with the music. It's on the same level as the music that's going on around it. So there are parts that are easy to miss if you're not really concentrating. I think that the mix just felt a little bit off. I think that and having watched a couple of other Nolan's films, I felt the same way. It's like a style he adopts for the balance and the mix of the audio, which sometimes I feel kind of does not quite work in some scenes. So aside from that, I don't really have anything bad to say about this. I like the concept of things moving forward and backward in time. The story, however, felt a little predictable. There's an episode of Red Dwarf where they go to a reverse planet and they land, and Lister instantly has bruises on his face, then he's got like a bad arm and his ribs hurt and all this kind of stuff, and then they go to this bar and the bar's all destroyed and they're sort of laughing about how it's a mess and whatever, and then they realise that everything's moving backwards. So rather than getting a bar fight, they get into a bar room tidy. So they tidy everything up, and so some guy punches Lister in the face, but it kind of removes his black eye, and then he hits him in the ribs and it removes his bad ribs. So it kind of runs everything backwards like that. There are a few moments in Tenet that are like this, and because I constantly kept thinking about that episode of Red Dwarf, I was looking out for those moments throughout the whole film, and there are loads of them. So when they suddenly do a big reveal of this happened because earlier in the film this happened, but it hasn't happened yet because we're reversing time, I was like, well, I just totally guessed that. So I felt that a few of the surprises didn't land, and they felt a little bit they felt a little bit obvious and didn't really sort of surprise me in the way that they were probably intended to. Overall, I want to score this as high as I can because it is a Nolan film and it ticks all those boxes. But ultimately, I have to look at ignore his previous achievements, of which there are many, and he is an amazing director, and just focus on this as a singular movie and how it works. I think it's a great premise. I think it's executed brilliantly. The story beats felt a little bit rushed. There is an issue with the sound for me. This could easily have been like a 4-part HBO series, and it would have established much better character development and story arcs. It did feel like they were cramming a lot into the kind of, I think it's like 2.5 hours, which is long for any film, but it doesn't feel that long, but they are packing it in there. I did like it. I am going to give this a 6 out of 10. Because it's not a masterpiece, it's not as good as his other ones, and I had a look at some of his other films and kind of sort of started rating them, thinking about what kind of order they might fall into. I think this is a 6, nearly a 7 for me. Again, there's so many brilliant things about it, but I'll probably rewatch it and then never watch it again. Whereas a lot of his other films, like The Dark Knight and Inception, I mean, I've seen those multiple times. This one I feel less likely to go back to. I don't feel an urge to do that. So because of that, I'm going to mark it slightly down. I think it's 6 out of 10. That's about it. I hope that you get a chance to see this soon. I know cinemas are slowly sort of coming back to life. It's probably going to be on a streaming service at some point in the near future, or the Blu-ray will come out before you get a chance to go and watch it at the cinema. I would thoroughly recommend you watch it. It's definitely worth a watch. It's really interesting, really clever. It has a few faults, but overall, I love Chris Nolan. So what's not to love about it? Be good, stay safe, and be kind to one another. Cheers.